Brands aren't just for businesses and business owners. We all have a personal brand. Whether we work for ourselves, work for a company, or don't work at all, our personal brand exists. So the question becomes, what do you want people to think of when they hear your name? If you don't know the answer or you want to change your current personal brand, this episode is for you. Today, I'm chatting with brand marketing strategist and founder of the boutique marketing agency Simply Multimedia, Milou Pietersz. Milou and I are going to talk about all things branding, content, and more. Now, Milou and I met on Instagram, where we bonded over our similar humor styles, and the conversations kept going from there. Milou is a marketing strategist for brands and creators, and she's the founder of Simply Multimedia, a boutique marketing agency. Milou has been featured in Forbes, CEO Weekly, and more. Plus, she's amassed an Instagram following of over 50,000 followers. She currently resides in Austin, Texas, but she's from the Netherlands. And we are making plans to meet up and grab coffee because, as you know, I'm here too. Milou, I'm so happy to have you on the show. Can we start by you sharing a little bit about your background and then how you became a marketing strategist?
Yeah, thank you so much for that awesome intro. I'm so excited to be here with you. So a little bit about my background. I'm obviously not from Austin or the United States by any means. I'm originally from the Netherlands, came to the US on a full scholarship as a tennis athlete. And the rest is kind of history, as I'm still here, right? I studied media and advertising in college. I always wanted to work for a big agency, like maybe New York City or something like that. But in reality, it was really, really tough to get a job right out of college. And I know this sounds cliche and many people have heard that story by now, but it's really tough to get a job. That at some point I kind of saw it as a sign to start working for myself. To be honest, it was a plan I already always had in mind. But I felt like I needed the experience to experience corporate for a year or see how things are done, right? Because, all I had was a degree, and we all know, you still need to put things into practice to actually know what you're doing. And so, yeah, I was ghosted by every agency, everyone I applied to. So I was like, okay, you know what? I'm going to use my tennis skills. I'm going to teach on the side to financially, support myself while building the agency. Then, of course, the whole COVID era hit, which kind of took me off the court in that sense and gave me more time to spend on the agency, which was a blessing and a curse. So from there on, I started building, and here we are now, a pretty successful boutique agency with a small team from 7 to 10 people. And I really, really enjoy what I do.
Oh, I love that. And what a story. And, COVID kind of throwing you off, the tennis courts financially. I'm glad that you were able to just shift gears and focus on your business. Now, can you explain like exactly what you do in your business or what your business does or offers your clients?
Yeah, so it's Simply Multimedia. We very recently actually rebranded, but we mainly do social media marketing, but really look at the overarching marketing strategy. Because what I started to notice in my journey and as my experience and skill set was growing is that, social media alone, we know it's just one marketing channel, right? Then there's the email marketing, the blogging, all the things. That's when I decided to rebrand into Simply Multimedia. We have the talent, we have the team, we have the skills. So we really offer a range of marketing services, but the main focus is social media marketing. And we build around that. We do a lot of PR. We do, blogging, email marketing outside of that to lead people into the funnel.
Awesome. Awesome. Now, the City Girl Savings community is filled with working with women, and whether they work for themselves, for a company, or just do freelance or side hustle work, I think with that in mind, I really want to hone in on the importance of a personal brand. So, in your opinion, what is a personal brand?
Yeah, I love talking about personal brands. And I know we talked a little bit about it before, and something that you mentioned about it being, people, what people say when you're not in the room. And I've seen that a lot. And while I do agree with that, at the same time, I believe your personal brand is what you want it to be, right? What you want to be known for, like you said earlier. I think we kind of get trapped into oh, what other people think of us and like what it needs to be and like sticking to the rules. It's like it reminds me of when people are on LinkedIn and others say, oh, this should be on Facebook type of deal when it comes to personal branding. But I feel like it really is what you want it to be and what you want to be known for at the end of the day.
And for someone who hasn't given much thought to their personal brand, how can they start to pinpoint what they want their brand to be?
Yeah, I think it's like also, of course, you have a personal brand offline, right? But we're really talking here about bringing it online. So it's looking at what are some things you do in the day-to-day life and like how can you incorporate these pieces into bringing that online? Like even if you don't have a business yet, you can still start building your brand, right? Things you do in the day-to-day life. Maybe talk to your friends. How would they describe you? What do they say about you? What is typical you, you know? And I noticed that in my early stages of learning about social media marketing, that all these little things are part of our brand. Like I used to be like a heavy coffee drinker with my Dutch background, and it's something I incorporated into my content. I started using it to compare it to strategy and social media channels, and there's so many ways you can incorporate those little things that are personal to you actually into your work.
Yeah. And I think another thing too is I know you mentioned like we're talking bringing your personal brand online, but it's important for people to understand that even if you don't have intentions of starting a business and you work in corporate or you work for someone else, you still have a brand, right? And you can still bring
Yeah.
that brand online and you kind of get to decide how you want that brand to reflect, even if you are working for someone else. Would you agree with that?
Totally. And I think it's so hard and still controversial for people that work for other people, unless it's like a freelancer being contracted, right? But if you're still in a corporate job or a full-time job, it almost feels like cheating for people to start building their personal brand. And in my head, I'm like, no, you need a personal brand. You never know when you get laid off, right? And I talk about this sometimes where nowadays I get a lot of people that I've known from before or that they're looking for a job, they're looking for work. And their one thing that they don't have is a personal brand. So I don't know anything about them or what they've been up to, the skills they have. I don't know anything about this person. So then it's really hard for me to even, give that a shot. As we always take chances on people. So having a personal brand really sets you apart.
Definitely. And I know this is probably more of an HR question, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts on it. I think a lot of times, too, people are afraid to put their personal brand out there when they work for, let's say, a Fortune 500 company, right? Like they feel like, well, if I say something here, is it going to get back to me there? And do
Right.
you have any tips for how people can still go about starting getting themselves out there from a personal brand perspective when they work for a big company?
Right. So, what I would say is start incorporating the day-to-day stories and lessons that you learn from your current job. That way you're not a threat to your job, to the company, but you're showing them off. So it's almost like a win-win. Talk about what's happening at work, put them in a positive light. That's how you can start and slowly kind of get out of your comfort zone and incorporate more personal things.
I think that's a great piece of advice. Like, really, take it back to your personal perspective. And I think also, too, just making sure you're familiar with your company's policy, right? I mean, if you work for
Yeah.
a company that, is publicly traded or something like that, you just want to make sure you're aware of what you can and can't say. But I think to your point, Milou, if you always kind of take it back to your perspective and what you've learned, you likely can't go wrong.
Right, right.
So for me personally, I remember when I worked in corporate, we had a meeting about personal brands, and something that the person who was leading the meeting said totally stuck with me. He said, your personal brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. And while we'll never 100% know what someone says about us if we're not there, I think the actions that come as a result of those conversations can tell us a lot about what was said. So, like when I worked in corporate, my name came up a lot for like new projects, promotions, and new roles. And all that shows to me is that what people said when I wasn't there were positive things. You mentioned that that's an aspect of it, but then also a person can have their own personal brand. But if we're talking about like a professional workplace setting, would you agree that, your name coming up in other people's conversations when you're not there is an indication of your brand?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that kind of goes back to what when earlier we said, talk to your friends, family, see how would they describe you? What would they say about you? And then you can kind of see the similarities in their answers. And there you kind of have it, right? So I definitely 100% think that is true. And of course, I mean, there's always going to be people who have an opinion about you. There are always going to be people who don't like you. But it's more about what message and words come up to people's minds when they think of you.
Definitely. And I think too, like the setting is appropriate to consider, right? Because if you are building your personal brand, let's say on Instagram, right? I mean, you're coming across individuals who only know you by what they see. They don't know your work ethic. They don't know much
Right.
about you other than what you share. So, their opinions may not mean as much as maybe your manager at work, right? So, being
Right.
able to kind of level set there is probably wise.
Yeah, that's a good point.
um, so what if someone doesn't agree with the personal brand that they currently have, or they want to reinvent themselves? And maybe we can take this approach from like a personal brand perspective, but even like a business, right? I know a lot of people who have kind of changed what they wanted to do for business. So any advice on reinventing a brand?
Yeah, I think first of all, it's important to know and accept it's totally okay to pivot, right? You don't have to do one thing for the rest of your life. And especially as entrepreneurs, we love to reinvent and do new things. And the same what I just went through with, multimedia, going from really being known for just social media management to now being like more of a marketing agency. I think there's nothing wrong with pivoting, and a smart way to go about it is to slowly start incorporating the new things into your content, right? And kind of leading into a launch where you announce what you do and making people aware, and then being consistent with the new message so that people are aware of what you're doing, what direction you're shifting into. And of course, sometimes you might lose people along the way because they're not interested in a new shift, and that's fine, right? Maybe they were just there for a phase, but that's, yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's great advice. Like instead of just, going full force, deleting everything and starting like brand
Right,
new,
right.
like ease into it and allow people to kind of take the journey with you so that they know what's
Yes.
going on as opposed to like, oh, who is this? Brand new
Right.
face.
And that's like a good point because I'm never a fan of deleting everything. It's part of your journey, right? It's part of your evolvement. If you scroll very, very long back, you'll see my first post. It was, horrendous, but like it's there, right? And it's the evolvement, the growth. And especially with a personal brand, that was still your brand, right? You don't have to start from scratch. It's all part of the process.
I'm right there with you. I mean, I do a tip of the day twice a week. I used to do it like every day. And if you scroll back far enough on the City Girl Savings Instagram, I mean that they were like piggy banks with pennies and funny text. It's comical.
Yeah, exactly. We all start somewhere, but you took that step to get yourself out there, which is why you're here right now.
Oh, thank you. And you're right. I mean, I think we always have to constantly grow and evolve, and let's pull the thread through a little bit on that because, someone like me, I am very much a if it's not broke, don't fix it type of person.
Yes.
Like at what point, and we can use me as an example, but like at what point is it necessary to grow and evolve, right? Like at what point does, the same old thing get so old that you do need to switch it up?
Yeah, I think it's when you start to feel comfortable, and you start to notice maybe you want to attract a different audience, right? Maybe your skills are evolving and you do want to attract, a different audience, and usually your content strategy shifts too, right? The messaging is gonna be a bit different with attracting a better type of client or a different type of client. So I feel like usually when we get too comfortable doing the same thing, it gets monotone, then it might be a smart idea to reconsider your offers and seeing maybe you want to launch a new offer that's more exciting. Maybe you want to provide more value to your current audience or clients. But I think that's a good starting point. Yeah.
Yeah. And, it's hard, at least for me, sometimes it's hard because, if something is working, right, it may not be working the best it could, right? And that's another benefit of switching it up. But if something's working, sometimes it's easier to just kind of stick with what works instead of changing it up. But, I think it goes back to like, who are you serving and what's your mission and what do you want to be portrayed as? And that's, going to play a role as well.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like that kind of comes back to fulfillment too. Because, right, something can be working and like you don't need to fix it. But if you are not being fulfilled and you want to aim bigger and better, then, it's still okay to switch it up and try something new.
Definitely. And one final thought on this. I was just listening to Jenna Kutcher's Gold Digger podcast, and she was saying that she's kind of gotten to a place in her business where everything is like business as usual. Like it's turnkey. She knows what to expect. Everything is kind of, flowing. If it's not broke, don't fix it. And, she kind of had this thought that, well, this is boring, or this is, not really what is this really what I want? And then she spoke with her massage therapist who basically told her that, hey, you put yourself in a position to have a business that runs smoothly, runs on its own. So instead of looking at that as a boring burden, look at that as a blessing and get clear on like, what do you want to do with your life? You can let your
Right.
business serve as that stepping stone, running business as usual until you figure out your next move.
Yeah, exactly. Or even having your own little new projects on the side, especially when things, run smoothly. That's what I like to do for myself. Start to work on different projects. I mean, it never ends, right?
Yeah, no, it definitely doesn't.
Start a
Uh,
podcast, for example.
yeah, yeah. Like, sometimes too, it's you can leave what's working alone, but add something new to the mix. Like you said, like
Yes,
start a
exactly.
podcast. Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's dive into content for a little bit. Do you think it's possible for people to have a successful personal or business company brand without creating content?
Yeah, so I think offline, sure, you can have a successful personal brand, right? I mean, you don't need to be online to create a six-figure business or whatever it may be. I know lots of people who have no online presence or like, they haven't had it until they were hitting six figures or more. So in that sense, I say no. But like if we're talking online, right? Then of course you need to be creating content to stand out and really build your name in the online space.
And what does like creating content kind of mean to you? Because I feel like it's it's a phrase that's used so often that people can get overwhelmed with the thought of creating content. Like it has to be this perfect thing. What do you recommend
Right.
for someone just starting out and that process of creating content?
Right. So just starting out, I would say pull out your phone and start talking to people. So start talking to the camera as if it's your friend. Start talking about the things you're doing in your business, your services, about things, lessons you've learned along the way. Kind of what you said earlier, where you take them along for the journey, right? And especially when you're just starting out, maybe you're still in the process of building your business. Take people on that journey. People do this all the time. And I've started to hone in on that a lot more, where I used to be one of those people where like, okay, I do the thing all by myself behind the scenes, then I launch it, then I show people. But now instead, what I'm trying to do is take my audience on a journey with me, show them what I'm doing. They can even be a deciding factor in some of these things. What do you guys want? You can vote, you can do this, right? So it's so powerful to connect in that way. And it all starts with our mobile phone that we all have, that has a camera that's way too good and it's not being used. That's what I think. What do you think?
I would agree, and I feel like don't make it so complicated. Like the way you just explained it, like we're already on our phones. We already have our phones. If, I'm drinking an iced coffee, like share your order, right?
Yes.
Like show people what you're drinking, what you're doing. I think that's a great piece of advice. And I kind of asked you two questions, but I want to go back to hearing what you would consider creating content and like your thoughts around that terminology.
Right. Yeah. So creating content, I mean, the first thing that pops into my head right now is video, right? Creating video content, because that can drip down into any type of content that you want to push out there, right? Like us recording this podcast can result into a month's worth of content. So I feel like creating content is really, capturing yourself, whether it's in your element on video, it doesn't matter. It doesn't even have to be video, but getting your message out there and what you're about, in whichever way you wanna do that. Even if it was audio alone, video alone, static, right? Your photos of, a conference you were at, or whatever it may be.
And I think the way you describe that kind of goes back to what we were saying, that creating content doesn't have to be difficult. It can align with
Yeah.
like what you're already doing on a day-to-day basis.
Exactly. And I feel like once you shift your mindset and get into that content creation mode, you cannot unsee it, right? You see
Yeah.
content everywhere. Like for myself, content is everywhere. I never run out. But that's just, obviously that's my brain and the field I work in. But I think any person can get into that mindset. Once you see it, you're like, oh, that makes sense.
I'm curious, did you start like that? So when you started your business, I mean, did you start creating content from the very beginning? How did that work for you?
Yeah, I actually did. I started creating graphics that didn't look good. I hopped on stories regularly for my then 400 followers. I actually posted one of those stories like in a green screen not too long ago about sharing with people. This was a story of me in 2019 to show them, hey, I'm showing up here. No one is probably listening to me. Probably not at all. But I'm showing up, and like I'm so proud looking back at that, because I was showing up, talking about my business, telling people what's going on. And yeah, so I would say I was creating content from the start, not on the level I am right now, but I was definitely trying.
That is awesome. And you should be proud of yourself. I feel like sometimes the hardest part is like actually doing it, right? And knowing that maybe you're
Yeah.
doing it and only one person is going to hear, or no one's going to hear, right? But you still show up
Right.
anyways.
Exactly. And it's that first story, that first piece of content that you can be the most proud of, because that got you to the end results. Like you said, that's the hardest part, just getting started. And it reminds me when I first started my YouTube channel, it was so humbling because I had an Instagram audience. Nobody cares about me on YouTube. I might get a couple of views. It took me a full hour to make my first video because I'm like, oh, I'm so, looking at what I'm looking and how I'm talking, and it was exhausting. And now it takes me maybe half an hour to shoot a quick video. But yeah, it's all about just getting started.
Yeah, and being consistent, right? I feel like had you given up right there when you did your first YouTube video and like the process and it like just being kind of overwhelming, had you kind of stopped right there, you wouldn't be able to grow. You don't even give yourself the opportunity to grow at that point.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm massive on consistency. And I think other people would say the same. It's just, I think it's in my athletic background, but another day goes by that probably I don't post. And even my YouTube strategist was saying the same. Like, out of all my clients, you are the most consistent. And it's because like I want that end result. I have a vision and I know what I have to do. So I just need to commit. And it's like everything or nothing.
When's your birthday?
August 19th.
You're like Leo Virgo cusp, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I'm a Virgo, so I see some
Oh, nice.
similarities, like the end
Yeah,
result thing, like eyes on the
right?
prize, like I'm not stopping
Exactly.
till I get it.
Yeah, exactly. And then I just, no one can stop me from that point. But it's a good trait to have.
Definitely. I'm kind
Uh,
of the same. Like one thing that I appreciated about myself early on is I didn't look at what other people were doing. Like I kind of had this idea of like what I wanted to put out there and I did it, right? And I just kind of
I love
kept
that.
doing it. And
Yeah,
I do think there is something to be said about, market research and like looking at like what people similar in your fields are doing and, seeing how it's working. I do think there's something to be said about that, but I've always kind of shied away from that and just focused on, what I thought would resonate with my audience and it served me well.
I love that so much because that's something I've been also trying to shift out of. Like I get so tired of looking what other people are offering, what offers they have, that I forget what I want to do, you know? Like whether it comes to the price point, like around what price point should I be? Around, what should I create? Do I need a membership? Do I need a course? Oh, this person has a mastermind. I need a mastermind. You know what I mean? It never ends. So
Right.
like I can so resonate with that because recently I was like gonna stop looking at what other people are doing because it's never gonna happen if I'm just gonna keep looking. And instead I'm just gonna do what feels right for me. And if, like we said, pivoting is okay. You can pivot out of it if it doesn't work,
Right.
and kind of go from there.
Yeah, and I think it also kind of comes back to like your mindset as a creator and then obviously the consumer's mindset. But as a creator or as a business owner, you know, you create based on what you think your ideal customer needs, right? And you do that knowing that not everybody is going to be your ideal customer. Like your message, your product, it's not going to
Yeah.
resonate with everyone, and that's okay, right? Like there's more than enough to go around. And I think that's such an important frame of mind to have when you're creating as a business owner or content creator.
Yeah, and that's almost like the hardest part too, because like you said, it's actually a great thing that it doesn't resonate with everyone. It shouldn't, right?
Right.
Because it just becomes harder to sell it. Like if you just resonate with anyone and everyone. But I fall trapped to that too when I'm creating stuff for social media managers where I'm like, oh, this is for everyone. But then I really should own down into this is for your first 2 years. This is for if you have been doing it for 2 years and up, because the skill set, the experience, it's also different at each stage.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely agree. So when I started my content creation journey for City Girl Savings, which launched January of 2015, like a long time ago, I started with a blog as my primary content source. And I shared everything like from the blog on social media. And there are quite a few things I wish I would have done differently back then. Like, for example, when I would create blog posts, I would do it under the pseudo name of the CGS team. So it was just me. There was only one person, but like every
Yeah,
blog post was from the CGS team. Like it took me
right.
like 2 years to put my face out there, my name out there. I would change that. But another thing I wish I would have done differently was set up my email newsletter. It took me about a year after launching to set that up. So you had mentioned email marketing a little bit earlier, but I want to hear your thoughts on email marketing.
Yeah, so that's actually so funny. I can resonate with both completely. Um, for the first thing, like I feel like that's kind of almost like an ick of mine. It has turned into an ick where I see so many people do this, where they're like, "Oh, the team" or "we," and it's really just a personal brand. And I get it. I've been there too, but it's okay to say "I" and put yourself out there and be like the front facing of your team. I
Yeah.
think it's powerful, if anything, because it just comes across silly sometimes when it's like, oh, meet our CEO, meet our founder, right? As if I think it's kind of what corporate teaches us in a sense, where
Yeah.
it's like, oh, meet our founder. And then the second thing about email, oh my God, same. Like, I wish I started sooner. I was one of those people that was like, oh, don't need an email list. I'm so tired of people saying that. I have social media, but definitely something I wish I started sooner. I'm huge on it now. I have a bunch of different lead magnets, right, and stuff like that. And I can tell, especially for my YouTube and all of that, it's so powerful getting people to click. Um, and a different marketing channel, right? To have different marketing channels outside of social media to reach people, and turn them into clients, if anything.
Yeah, I am still a fan of Amy Porterfield, and it was a couple years ago. She had said something like, you know, if Instagram were to shut down, if Facebook, YouTube, if they were like to be out of business for a day, a week, a year, and indefinitely, all your followers would be gone. Like all of
Yeah.
that is gone. So you have to have another platform for being able to contact customers and leads. And I think email marketing really is that.
Yeah, and that's something I had to understand too over the year. I think I was just kind of being stubborn in the beginning about it, and I get it. I do feel like social media platforms are getting better. And even without, followers disappearing or whatnot, it's still so powerful to reach them through email.
Oh, definitely. And in fact, I'm going to take this opportunity to pick your brain on like a question that I have. I have, a pretty good size Instagram following, but translating them into email subscribers, has been a challenge. So I'm curious if you have like any thoughts or tips or guidance on doing that.
Yeah, so a big thing for me is YouTube right now, right? So oftentimes I create a freebie that just goes with the video. So I hand out free templates that goes with the video, and I use that template to walk them through certain things. So I think that's a big thing. And just creating those free downloads that are highly, highly valuable that people actually want. I try not to gatekeep at all, but that's how I daily get people on my list. Because of the downloads.
Okay. So for me, if it's Instagram, it's like sharing to my stories or my feed some free downloads or free templates or, free things, period, to get them to
Yeah,
my email list.
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, do you have any lead magnets right now or any
I
free
do.
downloads?
Oh, yeah, I do quite a bit. And I think what I don't do well is share often enough. And
Yeah.
it's like you see the post and you see if you share it like next week, like it feels like it's just too like close together. But in reality, most people didn't even see the first post, right?
Yes, exactly. No, I'm huge on that, especially repurposing. I
Yeah.
probably talk about the same stuff every week. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But like it's you really do think like everybody sees everything you put out there, and that's just
Yeah.
not the case.
Right, exactly. So true.
So I know you mentioned like video is kind of really big right now, but I think some primary marketing channels are a blog, a YouTube channel, a podcast. What do you think about those marketing channels? Do you think someone just starting should have all three? Like what guidance do you have there?
Yeah, no, I love that. And I love that you had a blog from the start. That's actually really, really good. Yeah, so we actually only work with people who have long form content. So I would say pick one piece of long form content, whether that's a blog, whether that's a podcast, a YouTube channel. Maybe you have a full on course with all these videos in there, right? That would be another way. Or maybe you go live once or twice a month with other people. That's long form content as well. So I would say have one piece of long form content, and make that the foundation of your content strategy. And then you can go from there. It just makes your life so much easier. And I think a lot of people don't understand that. They
Yeah.
think, oh, that's so much work. It's a long piece of content. But you only have to do that once or twice. Like again, us sitting down like this, I know it's gonna be like a month's worth of content for us. And then at the same time, like you don't have to come up with a different piece of content every day, right? Because
Yeah.
that's crazy work.
Yeah, I wish you were there with me back in 2015 when I was writing blog articles every day. That would have been
Every
helpful.
day. Dang.
Yes,
I mean, we have all been there, right? I used to not have long form, but I really started to dial into it, and now I preach by it. And now all the struggles I had before with clients and stuff like that, they all make sense now. It's
yeah,
because they don't have long form content. And if you have a hard time showing up every day or every other day, it's because I know you don't have long form content.
yeah, yeah. And I think too, like quality over quantity, right? Like if you think you constantly have to put stuff out there every single day, number one, you don't. But number two, if you do like one piece of long form content a week, let's say, you can make that last all week, right? Like that can be your
Right.
post for the week or even the next week, right? So, quality over quantity.
Yeah, for sure.
So, when someone is looking to start a side hustle or a business, what should they know about marketing or think about marketing? I feel like marketing, like for someone who hasn't studied it, is like this kind of broad, like, I don't know what this
Right.
means. Like, what would you tell someone who is just getting starting that they should know about marketing?
I would say the biggest thing is focus, like especially when you mention the word marketing. This includes every possible type of marketing you can do, right? Social media, paid ads, blogging, SEO with your website, you name billboards, whatever you want to do, right? This is all marketing. So it's like, think for yourself, what can you commit to? Usually, you don't necessarily have the money yet, and so you're going to be investing time. So if you're going to invest time, then, pick one marketing channel. If it's social media, then find out where your audience spends the most time. If you're more B2B, for example, maybe you spend more time on LinkedIn. If, your audience is more creative or visually, they're probably on Instagram. And so you kind of want to do your research there to see where they hang out, and then just hone in and try to master that one piece. Because a lot of people, what I think they do in the beginning, they try to do everything. And it's like throwing spaghetti at the wall, and it's better to put all your attention into a small piece versus putting little attention into a bunch of pieces.
I definitely agree with that. And, I think the only thing that kind of throws that off, at least for me, is when a new platform comes into the mix, right? Like threads. Like I feel like threads, a lot of people transitioned over and you like had a lot of success with that. But that can take your focus, right? Like what if you're honing in on Instagram and then threads comes up and you're like, oh, I guess I need to be there. Like, where's that balance?
Yeah, I think it's really something like threats. Of course, threats is a little bit different, right? Because a part of our audience did translate over. But I do notice a lot of people follow me on threats and don't actually follow me on Instagram, which I think is pretty funny. But yeah, it's like thinking to yourself, is this a shiny object right now? Or is it actually gonna benefit me? Like, like if we're talking threats specific, if you have success on Instagram, then threads could help you, with that. But if you are struggling on Instagram already, I would say, figure that out first before looking at the next thing, because the learning curve starts all over again,
Mhm.
right? For most people, especially if you're not in marketing. Yeah, because there's a lot of shiny object syndrome in this industry.
That's a great piece of advice, right? Like if like the first thing that you have decided like this is where your audience is, like if you have not maybe mastered that or figured that out yet or got that to a place where you're comfortable with it, focus on that before moving to the next thing.
Yeah. Yeah, because that's the most common mistake I see people make. They go everywhere because they get kind of in a desperate phase, right? Just starting out, they want it to work, which I get. But if you can't figure it out on one side, then what makes you think you're gonna figure it out on a brand new place, right?
Yeah.
It's just gonna get harder and more disappointing at that point.
But like what about those like unicorns who have like their first post on TikTok go viral and like that
I know,
people
I
get that
know.
in their brain and they think like that's the norm and I don't think it is, but I'm curious, you're the marketing expert. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I see this all the time. It doesn't happen that often on Instagram anymore, I will say. Instagram is very hard, but yeah, TikTok and even LinkedIn, I see that a lot as well. I think it does more harm than good, not gonna lie.
Mm.
Especially going viral is a dangerous game. I think about my content so much before I put something up, because I'm like, if this were to go viral, would I attract the people I actually want here?
Oh.
Because like, on TikTok, you can put out something super funny and relatable. I thought about this. Me and my team often joke about the security question you get where you have to match the images. And I was thinking about doing a video about it because I thought it was funny, because I never know if the unicorn is up or down, when they ask you to match the images. And I feel like it's relatable for so many people, right? We all get that notification. But then I thought to myself, if this were to go viral, it's not going to be for the right reasons that would attract just random people thinking that this video is funny. So I decided not to go forward, just to give an example. So yeah, I
Oh,
think it's a dangerous game because it's uncontrollable, right? For
yeah.
the good and for the bad.
Oh, that's such an interesting perspective. And I've never thought about it like that because I think, we're so focused on, well, let me just go viral, right? And I'll figure out the rest later.
Right.
But you bring such a good point in. Like, what if you're attracting people that have zero interest or impact on your business? Like,
Yeah.
was it really worth it?
Right. And like I've seen that over and over again. Someone went viral and now the audience is not interested in what they talk about on the day to day. And that's where content strategy comes in, right? Everything needs to be aligned, have a purpose, so that it doesn't go viral for the wrong reasons. And it's similar to business growth, right? I've noticed this before too, where I had a time where I was growing at all costs. I just wanted to grow the business, and I was thinking more and more, yeah, we can take everything on. And it hurt the business quite bad. Like the team was overworked, everyone was struggling, I was struggling. Um, the work we put out wasn't our best work. And that's when I really realized that slow and steady is where it's at, because then we have oversight, we know what's going on. And that's similar to going viral.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I think it kind of goes back to what we were saying about, consistency, right? If you are consistent and you have the right message and you know what your product is, you know what your service is, you know who you're speaking to, sure, it may take time, but you will have that slow and steady growth and like you can
Yeah.
grow with that, which is nice.
Yeah, it's honestly the best growth you can have, the slow and steady.
So, this is a little bit of a sidebar question, but I'm really curious to hear your thoughts. I feel like when the pandemic hit, and I guess you can attest to this, like a lot of people transitioned to starting their own businesses or like going online and doing things like that. And, now 3 years later, uh, half of those people aren't here anymore, or like those accounts that were started, like are inactive. Do you think that there was like a surge of people kind of getting online and being business owners and creating content? And do you also feel like that surge has died down? And just what do you think about that in general?
Yeah, I think entrepreneurship isn't for everyone. I think that's a big part of it. Of course, with the pandemic, I think a lot of us were bored. We're all stuck inside, right? People did crazy things just because we're kind of going crazy, all of us. Right? Lots of people started online dating because they couldn't get out of the house. So I feel like, with that being said, like I used to be that person that would tell everyone, quit your job, become an entrepreneur. It's the best thing ever. But it isn't for everyone, right? So
Mhm.
I feel like the pandemic was a great opportunity for people to say, oh, let me do that. But it isn't for everyone. And you will soon find out if it is for you or not. And if you're not in it for the long run, then it's just not going to happen.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think it's okay, right? Like it's okay if you want to try it.
Exactly.
And if it works, great. And if it doesn't, great, right? Like at least you put
Right.
yourself out there and tried it. But I do think also, too, people underestimate how hard it is and how hard it
Yes.
is to start and run a business, but also how hard it is to be consistent, especially if your audience is small or like not very many people see what you put out there. Like you
Yeah.
still have to show up for long periods of time to power through that.
Yeah, and it's tough. Like I had so many times where I just had no motivation, and yeah, it's really tough. But like also a lot of people look at bigger accounts, right? And they're like, yeah, but like it's easy for you. You have a big, but like they don't understand like you used to be the dam, right? Except you didn't make excuses to actually make it happen, push through. And on top of that, your audience does not equal, the amount of money you make or the
Mm.
sales you make. Like I think a lot of people think it's easy. Oh, you have an audience. Everyone will just randomly buy whatever you have. And it doesn't work like that. You still have to market. have to be very strategic, show up. It's not as easy as it seems.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, you said so many like great things there. I think like, you know, everyone starts from zero, right? Everyone starts from
Yeah.
the bottom, and just because someone got there fast, in your opinion, doesn't mean it really looked like that. I think another thing too, like for me personally, I started City Girl Savings while I was working full time, and I did both for 6 years.
Yeah.
So that's a long time to one, do both, but to, you know, slow grind and continuously put, content and everything out there. But I did it that way because it allowed me to focus on growing my business without having to worry about how are my bills getting paid. And I think that can be
Yeah.
effective for people who maybe worry about that.
Yeah, totally. And like it's okay. Like everyone has their own journey. I've always said I feel lucky that I felt like I had no risk because I've never been in a corporate job. I know like from other people's experiences how hard it is once you get, take it into the whole safety net of getting a paycheck, getting benefits, and to then say, oh, I'm gonna let go of that, start something completely from scratch, have no idea if it will work out, but great, right? It
Yeah.
sounds ridiculous to do. So I've always been so grateful for not never having been in a job because I
Yeah.
always tell people I had nothing to lose. I only had something to gain.
Yeah.
And so yeah, everyone's journey looks different. I have so much respect for everyone's journey. So, some people have kids, others are still in multiple jobs until they can go full time. And everyone's journey just looks, unique.
Oh, that's such a good perspective. I think like people, doing both, like working full time and growing a business is hard in and of itself. But when your business gets to a place where it replaces your corporate income, people think, oh, well, that's easy. Like, I'm just going to go focus on my business. But it's not like you are literally giving up so much. And like, if you, like for me, like I grew in corporate. So like I had a brand there. I had built a reputation there. And you're also closing that chapter. Like there's so much more to it
Right,
than just transitioning for money. And I don't think
right.
people talk about that enough.
Yeah, so like my CEO actually had her, she has a long corporate background, talks about that a ton. And with the whole identity change, right, from your personal brand, going out of corporate, all of a sudden having to find an identity, if anything. Um, and yeah, so I'm just grateful to be surrounded by others who have had those experiences while I haven't had those. And yeah, so there's a lot to all of those things.
Definitely. Definitely. Okay, so we're kind of getting to the end here, but I want to hear your thoughts on this because this is something that sometimes I struggle with. As a business owner, as a content creator, it can be hard to just like shut down and turn off the work. How do you personally find that balance between your business and your personal life?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. A great question to end with. I personally don't really believe in balance. I think it's always out of balance, right? Especially, when you work for yourself, you probably overwork, right? And you make random hours. I recently started a new schedule. I wake up at 4 a.m. every morning and get a bunch of work done while it's dark outside. No one distracts me. And it has been great. Like, it has been so great. It allows me to sleep on time because I get done earlier. But I think it's finding what works for you. So, like, finding that balance, but also acknowledging that you're not always going to have balance,
Mm,
right? I think, especially depending on what your family situation looks like, if you are a mom or a parent, or, your balance is going to look so different than anyone else. So
yeah.
I think, don't be so hard on yourself because as entrepreneurs, especially in the beginning, we often get guilt tripped into why are you always working, right?
Hmm.
And it's because not everyone will see your vision. So I think acknowledging that there isn't always going to be balance and finding what really works for you. Yeah, what has worked for you?
Yeah, I think I'm literally like one of those people you just described. Like early on when I was working both in corporate and growing City Girl Savings, it was corporate during the week and then calls in the evenings, client calls in the evenings, and then the weekends were for like all the content and stuff. So I literally had no time. And I had to deal with like the people in my life who wanted to see me, wanted to spend time with me, like saying like, where are you? Like, did you just like
Yeah.
you work too hard, all of this. And it's because they didn't see the vision. But it also taught me that you do have to prioritize what's important, right? And those people were important to me as well as growing my business. So I had to make time, and it was a struggle. But it taught me that like you can do a lot more than you think with the time that you're
Yeah.
given. You
Yeah.
have to want it, and you have to think through it and focus on it. So that has helped me, and it's temporary. Like I always have this thought process that there are seasons, there are periods of time where you have to be head down and grind, or you get to relax. And I always
Yeah.
like go into seasons with that knowledge. And that helps me as well, just knowing that it's temporary.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Yeah, we talk about that a lot with the team too. It's just phases you go through. Like
Mhm.
if you have a launch coming up, it's not time to slow down and hang out. But like there's gonna be seasons where it's slower and you can kind of more go through the motions. So it's definitely, like I said, kind of always out of balance, but that's how you find balance almost, if that makes sense.
It does. It does. And like we won't even get into like when things come up in your personal life that totally like rock your world and your
Yes.
business. Like I'll get you back on the show and we'll have more conversations on that. But Milou, thank you so much for being here. Before we wrap, like what's next for you for Simply Multimedia? Like what's happening for you?
Yeah, so something exciting I'm working on right now is in the AI space. I'm working on actually cloning myself. So that's kind of like a fun side project right now, where I'm going to make an AI version of myself by
Wow.
scraping my knowledge from YouTube, all the other social media channels to be able to give more people access to me that way. So that's something I'm excited about launching.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, please keep me posted. Keep the City Girl Savings community posted. I need to get on the AI bandwagon, so definitely let me know how that goes.
Yeah, I definitely will.
And then, how and where can listeners connect with you?
Yeah, so I'm basically on all channels, but I'm probably most active on Instagram and YouTube as Milou, Milou, and my last name Pietersz, Pietersz. But I'm sure it will be in the description as well.
Oh yeah, I will link to it in the show notes for sure. So thank you so much, Milou. It's such a great conversation, and I can't wait to have you back on the show.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was so fun.